welcome to Southwest Virginia. Mr. Bell, Mr. Obenshain, would you join me on the platform, please? I imagine this is the first debate that you have been involved in where the word fight was used 3 times before the debate as both a verb and an adjective. But welcome to the Fighting Ninth. I'm glad you're here. I don't think it's necessary to tell you about the rules other than to say the candidates will have time for opening and closing statements. They will have the opportunity to ask a question of one another, and we will time their responses as we move through the evening. But first up, and we will take turns in the way they respond this evening. First up, each candidate has 3 minutes for an opening statement, and we'll begin with Mr. Bell. Oh, pardon me. Well, hang on. Have a seat 1 second. We do have a special welcoming video that I failed to introduce. Can we have that, please?
Good evening, folks. I hope you're all ready for a good debate. As a party, we're very lucky that we have so many good candidates running for office. I'm sorry for not being able to join you in person, but I look forward to seeing many of you at the state convention in May and everyone on the campaign trail over the next few months. As you all know, I'm running against Terry McAuliffe, and it's going to be a tough race. A tough race because every liberal in America wants to defeat our ideals and our message. But we have a weapon that not even Bill and Hillary's special interest money can buy. Our grassroots teams throughout Virginia. We already have an office open in Abingdon, and we'll be opening more as the campaign continues to progress. These offices are our hubs, but the real work happens with you in the field. I need you to talk to your neighbors, your friends, your family. This election will be won door by door, voter by voter, and we need your help today. We can't sit back and wait until the fall. We need your help today. Terry McAuliffe is the former chairman of the National Democrat Party, so it's safe to say that it's going to be a clear choice between him and me. I don't often agree with Brian Moran, but when Terry was running for governor in 2009, Brian Moran said, quote, "We need a fighter, not a fundraiser," unquote. Well, I agree with Brian, and I'm glad to tell you that I'm a fighter, as I've consistently fought for pro-growth, pro-jobs policies for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. When Terry McAuliffe brings his slick style to the Fighting Ninth, ask him, "Terry, where do you stand on coal? Terry, where do you stand on our way of life?" He won't tell you, but know this, Terry McAuliffe opposes coal, opposes the way of life here in the Ninth that fuels much of America. The Obama administration and their EPA would love nothing more than to establish an anti-coal beachhead right here in Virginia. I'll fight to make sure that doesn't happen, but I can't do it without you. That's why I need you to get involved with our campaign, as you can sign up to volunteer by visiting our website, which is www.cuccinelli.com, or stopping by one of our offices like the one in Abingdon. Thank you all for coming out today. I hope we have a lively debate between our candidates, and I'll see you at the convention.
Seating and questions are determined by a pre-debate drawing, and in that drawing we determined that Mr. Bell would have his opening statement first. Ask you to withhold your applause until the closing statements, please. Mr. Bell.
Well, good evening. My name is Rob Bell. I'm running for Attorney General. Let me tell you why. I believe that our Constitution, this is our Constitution is in grave peril. And it's in grave peril because Barack Obama does not accept the limitations it puts on him. He just doesn't. And ladies and gentlemen, if you elect me, I'll wake up each day and I'll spread the newspapers out and I'll go through them and I'll say, what did Barack Obama do last night? Is it constitutional? And if not, what are we going to do about it? But we can't stop there. It's not enough to play defense. And the reason, of course, is we have given up too many of our liberties already. I hope you understand just how bad the Obamacare decision was. It's not just about health care. It's not just about health insurance. Even if Congress came in and repealed the entire Obamacare law, that Supreme Court decision would still be there. And it would be a roadmap to the next Congress to say, if we want to take away their liberties and make them do something, all we got to do is call it a tax. So here's what we have. This is the third great expansion of federal power in the history of the Republic. After the Civil War was the first, the New Deal was the second. This was the third. It happened over the last 4 years, and it happened on our watch. On our watch. We have a moral responsibility to win our liberties back. It's not enough to play defense. We have got to win our liberties back. Now, I think we have a moral obligation in addition to give our kids the same Constitution that our parents gave to us. That's our moral obligation. Now, if you want to know how hard I'm going to fight for this Constitution, I just ask you to look at the Property Rights Amendment that was on the ballot last year. Because the story of that was the Supreme Court said, we're going to take away your property rights. We're going to let the government use eminent domain to take property from one person and give it to another. Not for a road or for a school, but just because we like that owner better. So here's what we did. In 2007, I had a constitutional amendment that would have put your property rights back in the Constitution where they belonged. It failed. It failed by 4 votes. Came back again in 2009. This time it didn't get out of committee. Tried to get in 2010. It didn't get out of the House. It was deferred. And if you know your parliamentary procedures, that means we're going the wrong direction. Every year we're getting further and further from success, and people did say, oh, come on, move on. It will never pass. It will never work. Find something else to do with your time and your energy, but that's not what we did. In 2011, we formed a big coalition. I was in the House. Mark was in the Senate. We had a Democrat. We put his name on the top because we thought that could get us the 1 vote we needed, and it did. And it did. It passed the Senate by 1 vote. We passed it again the next year. It got to you all, and you all passed it. Thank goodness. Thank you for passing that amendment. Put the constitutional rights back in the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, it will be a long, hard fight to win our Constitution back, but it's a fight that we have an obligation to wage and an obligation to win. I welcome your questions tonight, and thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Mr. Bell, thank you. Obenshain, we have 3 minutes.
You can tell Rob and I are both lawyers. We're congenitally unable to speak sitting down. It is great to be with you. Let me just first of all say thank you to the organizers. This is a fantastic setting, absolutely fantastic setup, and a great opportunity for us to exchange thoughts and ideas with you here in the Fighting Ninth. I want to tell you, Rob is right. We do have a president who is unrestrained by constitutional limitations, and he has shown it over and over again. And I thank God that we have had an Attorney General in the Commonwealth of Virginia for the past 4 years who has had the guts, the courage, and the determination to stand up and fight what the President is trying to impose upon us here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm thankful that he stood up and was the first Attorney General in America to stand up against Obamacare. I'm thankful that he had the courage to stand up against an overreaching environmental protection agency that cares more about scoring political points than it cares about the environment, whether it is stormwater, whether it is agriculture, and in the most personal way here in Southwest Virginia, whether it is the war on coal. We have got to continue to stand up and fight those fights. I want to tell you that when we lost this election, this past November, it highlighted for me the importance of making sure we've got an Attorney General who is going to fight, who's got the experience and the ability to stand up and take on an overreaching federal government. I have for 25 years been fighting big fights, and let me tell you, these are the greatest fights of our generation that are being fought right now in federal courts across America, and we must continue to fight those fights. I have, for 10 years in the General Assembly, been recognized for my efforts and successful efforts in standing up for our rights and for our values. I've been recognized by the Commonwealth's attorneys and for the sheriffs for standing up for public safety. I've been recognized for the Farm Bureau, which led the fight on property rights, for fighting since 2005 with Rob and Ken Cuccinelli to make sure that your property rights and mine are protected. Been recognized by the Family Foundation for standing up for our family values. And I've been recognized by the Chamber of Commerce for standing up for our free enterprise centralized system. I want to tell you, we have got to have an Attorney General who has fought some of these fights before. I've handled somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 200 constitutional cases during the course of my career. I'm ready to fight back. I'm ready to stand up for your Second Amendment rights. I hope that you will support me in my bid for Attorney General. I look forward to seeing you in Richmond. Thanks so much.
We have 5 questions this evening that we'll pose to each of the candidates. They will have 90 seconds to respond. Mr. Obenshain, you get the first question. Presently, the Attorney General only has jurisdiction to originally prosecute specific criminal violations of Virginia's law. Do you believe that a change to the law should be made so that the Attorney General would have concurrent jurisdiction with the local Commonwealth's attorneys to prosecute any criminal violation? For example, if a local Commonwealth's attorney refuses to prosecute a case, do you believe the Attorney General should be allowed to review and prosecute that case if it is so warranted?
Let me give you an example. I live in Harrisonburg. This fall, we had a situation in which a young man was engaged in collecting voter registration forms. He happened to be a Republican contractor, sadly. And it turned out that he apparently dumped about 8 to 12 voter registration forms in a dumpster. And there was an effort by the Democrats to demand that the Attorney General of Virginia step in and prosecute this young man's actions. Just so happened that the Democrats have opposed efforts to allow the Attorney General of Virginia to step in and prosecute acts such as violations of our election laws. That is a good example of a situation and a case in which it makes good sense for our Attorney General to have the ability to step up and prosecute. In our case, we've got a Commonwealth's attorney who is darn good and darn tenacious, and she is prosecuting this young man, and he stands accused of multiple felonies. You know, I've got a lot of confidence in our local law enforcement, and I've got a lot of confidence in our Commonwealth's attorneys around the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't think that the Attorney General ought to have blanket authority to step in and prosecute every crime in a case in which there's some indication or some belief on his part that the prosecutor has
I apologize.
has failed to prosecute, but there are cases where it makes absolutely great sense.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bell, it was a long question. Would you like it repeated? Okay.
So everybody, I actually worked as a prosecutor for 5 years. It was Orange County, I would say 1 high school, 5 stoplights. And we had 2 people in our office, the Commonwealth's attorney and me. We handled every case that came through the door. So everything from the homicide to the shoplifting, everything was in our purview. I think that for the everyday cases, the shoplifting cases where there's a fight at the bar on Saturday night with a disorderly conduct, I think those are properly handled by the local Commonwealth's attorney. He knows best what the people are used to. He knows what the juries will do locally. He knows the judge best. I think for those cases it works just fine. There are some cases, though, where we think the Attorney General, for lots of reasons, should be allowed to have some kind of jurisdiction. And if you look at the Code of Virginia, there's a list. And it's a list of crimes you would think would make sense. So think certain things on the internet, certain cases where it makes sense to have the Attorney General step in. One of the ones we're looking at right now is voter fraud. And the issue would be that there might be a voter fraud where the person who is the Commonwealth's attorney might have, Commonwealth's attorneys are elected officials, especially in smaller communities. You might already know the person. It might be very hard for that to be prosecuted. I had a bill this year that would make it a jurisdiction of the Attorney General to actually prosecute voter fraud cases, so we could step in. Where there's a voter fraud case and say, under current law you have to be invited, which makes no sense. We'll let you step in. That bill is on the governor's desk right now. I'm hopeful he will sign it. If you like the idea of the Attorney General doing voter fraud, please contact the governor and tell him to sign it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. If you want to just remain there, we'll direct the second question to you first. It is, presently Virginia has no law making it illegal to possess or carry a firearm on public college, university campuses. However, all public colleges and universities have adopted regulations prohibiting the possession of firearms, even those carried by concealed permit holders on their premises. Do you agree with these regulations? Are the regulations lawful in spite of Virginia having no explicit law prohibiting firearms from public college and university campuses?
Yeah, I have voted for and opposed the idea that if you have a concealed carry permit, you shouldn't be allowed to carry on college campuses. And I think it's no great shock that some of the biggest tragedies we've had, and we all know what we're talking about, have been in places where people are known not to have a firearm. Nobody. I mean, the bad guy goes onto the campus and he can know for sure that absent the university police, there's nobody else. Nobody else. I think that's a mistake. I think that a law that would say that if you have a concealed carry permit, you can carry on a place like a college campus, a public campus, is something that I would support. I've supported it in the past. I would support it again. Thank you.
Mr. Obenshain, would you like me to repeat the question?
I've got it. Thank you very much. You know, every couple of years there are a handful of bills that are introduced in the General Assembly attempting to address situations where there really is no problem. Banning handguns in areas in which there's no evidence that handguns are a problem. And, you know, I'm not concerned about the law-abiding citizen. You know, the people who obey these laws are not going to be the people who are going to be committing these crimes. And as a matter of fact, all you have to do is look here locally at the Appalachian School of Law shooting, in which my understanding is one of the first people on the scene who was able to have a role in bringing this to a stop was an off-duty police officer or a student who had been a police officer who had a weapon in his car. I think that it makes no sense to adopt these laws that are going to make people feel good, some people, not a lot of people, by modifying the rights of law-abiding citizens. You know, we've got urban college campuses around Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, and if we pass a law like that, how do you enforce it? Do you enforce it with respect to people driving down Grace Street, right through the middle of campus? I don't think it makes sense. And I do believe that we ought to protect the rights of law-abiding citizens to continue to bear arms.
Question 3 goes to you first, Mr. Obenshain. How will you deal with the EPA to allow Virginia to produce more coal and gas that give us more jobs, and also limit the closure of coal-fired plants and boilers that already exist? Would you consider bringing court cases for these big job issues against the EPA and federal government?
Yes, without a doubt, absolutely. The Environmental Protection Agency is an agency out of control. Lisa Jackson, the former administrator of the EPA, early in the Obama administration, went to Europe and actually shared with a group of European leaders what she viewed as her job. She told them, I have 16,000 employees who stand ready to fundamentally transform the American economy. Got that? The American economy. I thought it had something to do with clean air and clean water, but her actions have consistently, and the actions of the EPA have consistently demonstrated that that is not the case. And they have consistently violated federal law in imposing regulations and in taking positions that are detrimental to the way of life in Southwest Virginia, that are detrimental to the rights and the ability of ratepayers to be able to continue to be able to afford electricity across the Commonwealth and across the United States. The Cuccinelli administration and other attorneys general have backed down the EPA on no less than 6 different occasions upon which they have engaged in or adopted regulations that are clear violations of federal law. Most recently, the trans-boundary emissions standards, which sought to regulate emissions crossing state lines, however they were going to do that. And we have got to continue to push back against the EPA and challenge these illegal regulations.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bell?
Yes, again. I mean, does everybody understand how different their vision of America is? Southwest Virginia happens to be ground zero for the changes they're trying to make to the country, but their goal is to fundamentally transform our country into something that it's not, which is a European socialist state. And the way they're going to do it, they can't find a way to make the wind power cheap enough. The solar power just isn't cheap enough. It can never be competitive with coal. And so what do? Well, you make coal more expensive. It's the same thing they're doing in other aspects. Virginia has a cheap labor regime. There's a reason why we do things here that they can't do in California. Again, do you make California more competitive? No. You make us less competitive. We need to fight every single step of this. There might be some groups that you can meet them halfway and come up with a compromise that's clear that this administration is not it. So yes, fight every single step of the way. Fight them here, fight them up in Fairfax. One of the big wins that Ken had was a water case in Fairfax County. Keep fighting, and you can work with the other attorneys generals across the country where they have a win, learn from it, where they lose, figure out what they did wrong. We should work together to fight every step of the way, absolutely.
Mr. Bell, the next question is for you first. The Center for Public Integrity released a report detailing the risk of corruption and lack of accountability in all 50 states. The findings of this report should concern anyone who believes state governments are transparent and free of corruption opportunities. Virginia failed miserably. We're fourth from the bottom and received 9 Fs. What steps can Virginia take to correct this deficiency?
Okay. So there are some things we have done, and surely there are some more that we can do. The first would be, of course, make sure it is easy to follow the money. So you need to be absolutely clear when we get a donation from somebody, where it comes from, when it arrives, how quickly we get it, so you can see if it's impacting our votes. On that, we're actually doing pretty well. If you look at the online, you could go right now and look up every person that's given me more than $100, the same for Mr. Obenshain, and you can say, oh my goodness, in September of 2007, there was a sudden change in his votes, and what do you know, in October of that year, there was a sudden change in donations. You can track it just the way you want to do. The second, we need to have as many open meetings as we can. In other words, the less that's done in the back room back here, the more you can be confident that what you're seeing is what's actually happening. And so a few years ago, we changed the rules to make sure that all of our votes are online. It doesn't sound important, but I mean, it's hard for you to get to Richmond. It's harder for you to watch. I mean, there's some video or something, but if you want to see how we vote in committees and in subcommittees, you can do it now because that's online. I think that's the step where we can do better. Where we can do more to open up our meetings to make sure that there's something happening. If there's some issue that you care about, and you know who I am, and you've checked my donations, but you want to see the negotiations, I think it's important to do more we have for open meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Obenshain.
A couple of things. First of all, there are several different areas in which we need to be vigilant in making sure that we're transparent. Number one is in the administrative functions of the state government and local government. I think we need to do a better job of giving voters and citizens access to information about the expenditure of monies, down to access to checkbooks and check registries. And we're doing a better job with this. There's no reason with the electronic resources that we have that we can't do that. Number two, Rob mentioned sunshine. We, I think, do things right in the Commonwealth of Virginia with respect to election finance. There is no contribution that is given to candidates in Virginia that doesn't go up on the internet, and it should. And if we are receiving contributions, you ought to know about it. And we need to make sure that there is local accountability and that local contributions go up there as well. Third, we need to make sure that that people are involved in and have the opportunity to be involved in the legislative process. We pass a budget every 2 years. Very seldom do legislators really even have a meaningful chance to read the budget before it's passed, because it comes out minutes before we vote on it. You ought to have the chance to be able to read it and talk to us about it before we vote on it. Those are a few of the things we need to do.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we'd like to give each of you the opportunity to ask a question of the other. And Mr. Obenshain, if you would like to ask Rob Bell the question.
Sure. Rob, you know, as we travel around the Commonwealth of Virginia and attend these functions, we talk about a lot of the same bills that we've carried, like property rights, and we talk a lot about some of the criminal justice bills that we carried, like the bill imposing a mandatory minimum for the rape of a child that both of us carried. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult for us to find areas upon which we've differed over the course of the years. And one area that I think we've consistently voted differently on, and I think both of us might have want to have an opportunity to address, is constitutional conventions. And over the years, you've consistently, I think, voted for bills to set up constitutional conventions to address the balanced budget. I've consistently voted against it. Maybe you could tell folks here why you support it, and give me an opportunity to tell them why I oppose it.
So everybody, the issue is a constitutional convention, and this is one of the ways that you can amend this Constitution. It's in Article 5. Most of you know the other way you amend the Constitution is Congress proposes, goes out to the states. This would be a constitutional convention itself. Now, just so you know, Ken Cuccinelli himself has proposed and supported a constitutional convention for a different issue. For me, it's the budget. I'll just do a thought experiment with you. We are $16 trillion in debt. It is another $1 trillion each year. Please raise your hand if you think Congress is going to balance the budget on their own. Okay? Please raise your hand if you think they're going to propose a constitutional amendment that will tie their own hands behind them. Okay, somebody does. One person does. All right, for the rest of you, you're in this with me. The question would be, what are we going to do with a Congress that is spending us into penury, that will break our country? I think we say we need to consider absolutely every possibility. I think it's a last thing to do. But I do think we need to at least consider an opportunity to say we will come up with a constitutional amendment that will bind Congress. The Founding Fathers put it in the Constitution for that reason. For when Congress is the problem, I think Congress is the problem. I think we need to leave it on the table. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Bell, you have the opportunity to ask Mr. Obenshain a question.
Okay. I had a much easier one before that one. That was hard. Now everybody, Mark and I are friends. We've been friends before. I think that we're friends now, and the people we're often asked, how do you get along? So let me just make the question. So, Mark, I noticed in the back is your daughter Tucker, and you seem to have great success in having her help you with things. And she's driving him around everybody. I see her at all the events. She's advocating for him. And I have a 4-year-old daughter who I can't even get to pick up her dolls and put them into bed. And I would welcome, brother, any thoughts you have on how to make my daughter turn out as well as Tucker has.
Boy, you know what? Rob, you and your wife are great parents, and you know, one of the things about this process is we really had a great time traveling around the state together. And I have to say that this has been one of the greatest experiences of my life, being able to travel around with Rob and with these great guys running for lieutenant governor. And every bit as importantly as that, is, you know, these guys who are in the back of the room, these young folks who are working on all of these campaigns, they put in enormous hours, and they do it for love of the cause. We do it, I think, for love of our family. And we're not out here to get another job so that we can collect the glory, but we're out here because Rob cares about his 4-year-old daughter. I care about my 21-year-old daughter. I'm out here fighting, just like Rob is, to make sure that they have the same rights that we had and the same opportunities. And Abby is going to turn out just wonderfully.
Thank you. And gentlemen, you each have 3 minutes now for a closing statement. And Mr. Bell, you are first.
Happy to. I went first at the beginning. Okay.
Pardon me?
I went first. I had the first opening.
You asked the last question.
That's fine. That's fine. All right, so everybody, thanks again for having us up here and coming out on a Saturday night. We had a chance to talk about some things that involve the office. We talked about the Constitution. Let me talk to you about crime for a second. Prosecuted 2,400 cases. I believe you have criminals that are knuckleheads that we got to work with, and we have some that are evil that we just have to lock up. I was very proud of the bill that we passed last year that said that if you rape a child who's 12 or under, you go to prison for the rest of your life. I was the House patron. Mark worked on it in the Senate. That's the law of the land. It'll keep these people from reoffending again and again. We talked about, we haven't talked about welfare reform. Welfare is when you take money from somebody who's working. You and give it to somebody who's not. I had a bill that said that you will not get cash welfare benefits until you can pass a drug test. That bill has not passed. I'm going to keep working on that. We have this whole issue about voter ID. I think you should not get to vote unless you have it. No exceptions, no excuses. Photo ID to vote. I had a bill, Mark had a bill, mine didn't make it. His is on the governor's desk. Please call the governor and get him to sign that bill. Now, those are some of the things we've worked on. Let me just tell you, I'm proud of the support I have in this race. Many of the people who have had constitutional issues have endorsed me. So Bob Wilson is the gentleman whose property is being taken by the city of Norfolk to make it into a movie theater. He's endorsed me. Martha Benita, County of Fauquier is trying to find her because she had a birthday party for her kids, violating her property rights. She's endorsing me. Dick Heller, the gentleman who sued Washington, D.C. to create the case that affirmed the personal right to possess a firearm. Hard to believe it's been that many years, but he did it. He's endorsing me. I've got an A rating from the NRA, a 100% rating from the American Conservative Union. These are the things I'll bring to the table. Now let me close with this. I was raised to believe that nothing is more important than hard work. Nothing. Doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how good looking you are. Nothing is more important than hard work, and I've tried to live my life that way. So that's how I became an Eagle Scout. That's how I won a scholarship to UVA. That's how I borrowed the money and put myself through law school. It's how I won my first political office, because I can assure you I was not the first choice of the power brokers. That's how I worked as a prosecutor, and that is how I got that, or worked with everybody to get that constitutional amendment passed, just banging your head against the wall 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, until finally you break through that wall. That is how I've tried to live my life. I promise you that if you elect me to be your Attorney General, I will fight doggedly and relentlessly to win you back your Constitution. I think that's what Virginia needs in its next Attorney General, and that's why I need your support at the convention. Thank you very much.
Once again, allow me to say thank you to the 9th District Republican Party for hosting this forum. It's been a pleasure to be with you. It's great to be here, and a great opportunity to share. Thanks to Rob for being here and participating in this as well. You know, there's a guy named Mark Herring, lives in Leesburg. He's a member of the State Senate, has been there for 6 years. Mark Herring's running for Attorney General as a Democrat. And Mark Herring is traveling the Commonwealth of Virginia, telling everybody who will listen that we have got to take the politics out of the Attorney General's office. Allow me to translate for you. What that means is he wants Rob's politics, he wants my politics, and he wants your politics out of the Attorney General's office, and he wants an Attorney General who will lie down and will not stand up to an overreaching federal government, whether it is on environmental issues, whether it is on coal, whether it's on health care, or whether it is on our Second Amendment rights. We cannot allow that to happen. We have got to have somebody who serves as Attorney General, who runs for Attorney General, who has a record of accomplishment, somebody who has fought these fights, somebody who will have the ability to lead that office. I have led law offices for the past 25 years. I have fought these fights. I have won these fights in the General Assembly. Just this year, I fought for our Second Amendment rights. You saw, and I saw, the President when he stood up in January on national television. He read a letter from a 3rd grader who displayed a better understanding of the limitations imposed upon his office than he did, saying, "Dear Mr. President, we want you to do something about guns, but we know you have to go through Congress to do it." Following which, the President issued his 23-point plan for undermining our Second Amendment rights. And following that, we saw a New York newspaper that published an interactive database showing the location of every gun owner in the vicinity. It was dangerous, it was wrong, and we took that opportunity here in Virginia to pass a bill that I introduced to protect your confidentiality and your privacy in the event that you have a concealed carry permit. I fought with Rob since 2005 for our property rights. I fought for photo ID since 2005, and this year finally it's passed. I want to close by telling you this. We cannot be satisfied with drawing that line in the sand any longer and saying we are not going to give up any more of our freedom. I think that over the course of the past 4 years, we have given up too much of our freedom. It is disappearing at a galloping rate. We have to be assertive. We have to be aggressive. We need to do the unthinkable. You know and I know, freedom once lost is seldom ever regained. We have to do that. We have to take it back. God bless you and thank you for your hospitality tonight.
We have a Southwest Virginia